the suppression of the use of marijuana and of the forces lurking behind it are the most important jobs this department is now engaged in. In 1930, the records on marijuana in the Washington office of the Narcotics Division scarcely filled a small folder like this. Today, they fill cabinets.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Coloradians and everyone that's smart enough to listen from the outside.
It's one of the most amazing plants we've ever discovered.
The pot party, the trippers, the grasshoppers, the hip ones, all gathered in secrecy and flying high as a kite.
I got weed pots.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Stoned Appetit with your host, as always, it's me, Kip Wilson. We're going across Zooms today for the intro because we have a kick-ass interview that we pre-recorded. CB, how you doing, Big Bear?
I'm doing great. Coming off a fun-filled previous night at the museum, and sadly Eve couldn't appear, but neither here nor there. I'm doing great.
We continue to invite Eve to things where it's just like us. What were you doing that was so important that you couldn't bond with us over dinosaurs and, stegosauruses, the occasional mammoth?
I'm not saying what I did was important. I just couldn't get there in time.
That's fair. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before we dive into today's episode, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors. It's munchie season, Chris. Great weather. What better way than just diving into a little bird call? Fire that order in, whether it's kiosk or online. You can get delivery, or my preferred way is takeout. Go right into those little cubby holes like we're in first grade. Grab your chicken Sammy, a kick-ass order of tots, and get the fuck out of there. You can make it to the park. You can make it to a concert. You should be able to make it to a museum. That's how quick it is. Quick turn, in a hurry. And it's not like those other chains or other businesses that maybe leave things out or have a subpar chicken. Birdcall double checks. They can customize any of their chicken sandwiches, or they can even customize some of their sides as well. They have a litany of options no matter what your craving or dietary restrictions may be. Shout out to Meryl and our vegan community. We know the meaty with an I sandwich actually slaps. That's a testimonial we've been told from a personal vegan that we know. Like, we know them. They said it's actually good. And Chris and I can vouch that the chicken sandwiches are good as well. So if you're looking for a solid little Sammy, whether you're sliding through for happy hour or 420, or you're just trying to grab family meals, they have tenders, nuggets, kid menus. They've even have salads for those that are trying to watch their figure as we get closer to the swimsuit season. But yeah, I'm going to continue to eat chicken sandwiches no matter what season it is. And I'm going to continue to eat Birdcall because that shit slaps. So thanks to our friends over at Birdcall. We couldn't do it without you. And we're stoked to be partnered with y'all for the spring push as we try to get tan and fit, ordering salads and things like that. Chris, the first part of this episode, we're going to lean right on you. Let's go right back to dinosaur recap. You work with some pretty cool motherfuckers, despite the fact that everyone thinks you just have a bunch of Ross Gellers in that museum. There's some actually cool people with personalities and a lot of knowledge that they were able to showcase to us. I had a blast last night.
Even paleontologists put their pants on one leg at a time. I mean, they're just like us, I think what you witnessed last night is the fact that the people working in our science divisions at the museum are passionate about what they do. Like, they love being there. They're carrying out their own research. They're working on different projects. And so they love what they do. Being part of that, being at a museum, they love getting people interested and engaged. And I think they knocked that out of the park.
It was so neat. And we're not trying to rub it into Eve's face, but we would be remiss if we didn't lead today's episode with shout out to the Museum of Nature and Science in Colorado. Obviously, y'all have probably seen it. They've broken ground or getting closer by day by opening a new children's playground. And the museum is usually littered with fucking kids. But for the members that sign up for memberships, having these events where you get it in a different aspect, the after hours option with shout out to the snacks, bar, but at the same time, getting to be able to talk to people that know about it. So these questions don't go unanswered. And that leads me into my next comment. Y'all knocked it out of the park. That was really cool. I hope y'all do that more for folks.
But yeah, definitely, like I would say if you've been to the museum once this year or want to go again or want access to certain like special events, movies, just become a member. Like that's not a paid ad read. We're doing it because it's cool, but like the membership there, the benefits are great, especially if you have a family.
Eve, have we rubbed it in enough that you missed out on an excellent evening?
Yes, you have.
Do you have any
Clear.
questions for me, the new paleontologist of the podcast?
No, I don't.
She's so mad. Okay, so literally that's all we had. We're leading into Master Sommelier. Once the sommelier of the world, Larry Stone, is joining us on the podcast. But before we get out of here, we would be remiss. Over the weekend, ThriftCon is going down Saturday and Sunday. Like if you're looking for consignment, secondhand, if you're looking to kind of sell some stuff or learn about other folks that have markets online, ThriftCon is going down this weekend. Secondly, Mile High Asian Food Week starts this Sunday, April 28th, and runs until May 4th. There are 100 plus locations across the Denver metro area, from Castle Rock to Longmont, that will be participating in this, whether it's special menu items, discounted prices, collabs between multiple restaurants or pop-up vendors working in restaurants, as well as a couple different spots will be doing secret menu items. You'll have to go in there and whisper things like, "Hello, Clarice." Also, they'll say, "Hey, I'm here for Mile High Asian Food Week. I heard you have a dank-ass special. Hit me with it." We're going to be showcasing all that on our social media throughout the week, but literally just Google Mile High Asian Food Week, Mile High AFW. And literally on the homepage, it says view the vendors. And then it gives you either dietary restrictions, locations. It gives them to you in alphabetical order. I mean, quite literally, they've made it so streamlined and easy for you to find whatever you may be craving, whether you're craving, bobas. Maybe you're craving a nice little taco that I had today. Or if you're looking for just a dank-ass collab like your Yuan wontons with noisette, it's going to be awesome. All right. That'll do it.
Look at that. You learn something new every day. That voice y'all heard is Mr. Larry Stone. He is quite the mover and shaker in the world of wine. I think you're like an OG oenophile. Check out that alliteration.
Yes, OG oenophile. Fantastic.
He's also the founder of Lengua Franca out of Oregon.
Out of the Willamette Valley, the Ola Hills in the Willamette Valley, which is in Oregon. But it's a very special place. Yes.
We have Larry joining us. He's been kind of, I'm not going to say doing the circuit, but he's hitting all of the best restaurants. He's pairing up with the best chefs in Colorado. And luckily, we were able to take a little time to speak with Larry because, y'all, I'm telling you, he is a treasure trove of knowledge. He's been everywhere. He's worked with some of the kings and across all of hospitality industries. And today, we're just going to pick his brain for 30 minutes. Before we dive into that, we always start every episode the same way. I want to give a shout out to our buddy Spencer for setting this whole thing up. I appreciate you and the High West team for always being there for us. Y'all know greatness, and so this episode should be no different. Thank you to our friend Spencer for setting this up. Larry, I guess this won't really apply to you, but we ask all of our Colorado's guests, are you a transplant or native to Colorado? Well, let's just start with, where the hell are you from?
I was born in Seattle. And then I lived there most of my life until I was about 35. And then I became the best sommelier in the world, in America first. So the company I worked for at the time was Four Seasons Hotels. They moved me to Chicago, so I worked in Chicago for about 5 years for a guy named Charlie Trotter. There's a movie out. CT. There's a movie, Love Charlie. I recommended it. It's on Amazon. I think it got on to Netflix too finally, but it's on Amazon first and Apple TV. Love, Charlie is the way he would end a letter, and he wrote sometimes a dozen letters a day. He was a procopious writer of letters to loved ones and to friends, and he was a genius, but he was also an artist. So he was He was a self-taught in a way. He went around and trained, but he was self-taught. He was a great guy to work for. And that was not the beginning of my career. I was already there after I became the best sommelier in the world. So I hooked up with Charlie Trotter after I left Four Seasons, and I stayed there for about 4.5 years. And then I opened my own restaurant in San Francisco. So then I've moved around a little bit. And in San Francisco, I was in the Bay Area for about 15 years. My partners in the restaurant that I had called Rubicon were Francis Ford Coppola, Robin Williams, and Robert De Niro were my partners, along with they were a lot of fun and very interesting people and brilliant. And then the other partner who got me into it was Drew Point. He's a restaurateur. He helped to create the Nobu restaurants, and he had Tribeca Grill.
He's pretty close with De Niro, too, isn't he?
Well,
I can see that group with the Nobu team and De Niro. He seems to be kind of with that.
De Niro's a big partner in those Nobu restaurants. So yeah.
That's so wild. So, I guess let's dial it back a little bit. So before you became such a highly regarded sommelier and had all of the accreditation, was it the restaurant industry that made you fall in love with wine? Was it living in the Pacific Northwest, where it seems obviously from Sonoma all the way up to Wawa and Willamette and things of that nature? How did you find your place in the hospitality industry?
Well, it found me. I grew up in a family that came from food production. So my mother's family grew wheat and cattle, and they were voted to be the town communal miller in Romania. And a part of Romania that may scare people called Transylvania. But Transylvania is a great place today. Actually, many films are filmed in Transylvania because it's still a rural agrarian place, and you can shoot as if it were in the 19th century. So Francis Ford Coppola made films there, and there are other films. And so it was like one of the best farmlands in Europe, and it's called Romania because the Romans settled it, and the Roman soldiers got us their reward after a career in the army and risking their lives. They got farmland of their own in Romania, some of them, and they stayed there, and they fought off the Turks when the Turks invaded, the Ottoman Turks when they were invading Europe. They fought them off, and they kept Romania a Romance language. So it's old spoken Roman language that the soldiers spoke, and its descendants that are the language of Romania. So it's a Latin language, and but her village were Jewish, so it consisted of people who spoke Yiddish and Hebrew. Then it had Germans, it had Romanians, and it had Hungarians. So for my mother, I learned all those cuisines. I learned French, also since Romanian is a Romance language. The second language in Romania at that time was French. So all the girls had to learn French cooking, like we have to learn home ec in America. They had to learn French cuisine. She knew all the sauces. She taught me that. My dad knew all the sauces. They were into food. So I grew up with it. And I wasn't going to be a cook. I was going to be a scientist. I studied chemistry, but I loved cooking. So all through college, I worked my way through college by cooking for other people, not as a professional cook, but I'd have there'd be a rooming house. There'd be 5 people, 6 people in the house. We'd rent together, and they saw me cooking soufflés and boeuf bourguignon and things like that. And they go, "We can't even boil an egg. Why don't you cook for us? We'll buy your food. You just cook for all of us." I say, "I can cook for 5 people as easily as for one." So I did that, and I got my way through college doing that. And the reason I got in the restaurant business, I love food. I loved wine. I made wine when I was 13, so I grew up with it. I was interested in wine. I started tasting wine when I was 5. My parents thought it was amusing because I could blind taste. And so when I was 7, I could identify wines in a decanter by the appearance and then smell them, and I could actually take a tiny sip. So I knew about food and wine, and when it came time to get through college, one of the other things I did besides cooking for my housemates was I worked as a dishwasher in a restaurant.
Well, let's talk a little bit about wine, because I think you may be one of the most intelligent people that we've had on this podcast for wine. And so you mentioned something along the lines of, the Romanian vibe of which you grew up with. And we're starting to see more of that kind of presence in American, wine shelves. There's, shout out to Rose Privet, who put me on a bunch of Georgian wines this time last year. And so I've started to learn a little bit more about it. But what y'all have been able to do, not only at Lengua Franca, but also at your, you've helped open up a litany of wineries and vineyards and things of that nature. How does one start? How did you realize, okay, you are a chemist, you're a little bit of a nerd, you can own it, you can nerd out on wine at a young age, you were doing it off the nose, and you've since grown this, you know, gastroeconomy and like, you know, enjoying the sciences and enjoying the pleasures that you get from wine and food. How does one go about that? You know, how did you get to that place where you were winning, you know, some sommelier of the year of the world? That ain't just like in Denver or in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
The whole fucking rock. You are the king of the castle for a long time. How did that, I guess, rise so happen?
I just loved what I was doing and focused on what I was doing, and it was by accident I won any of those things. I didn't enter these competitions. I had no fear of passing or failing the Master Sommelier exam. I just took it and I thought, well, I won't pass, but it'll be a nice experience. And I get to meet all these other sommeliers that are also love wine. And in Seattle, there aren't that many sommeliers, and I got to go and meet sommeliers from New York and stuff. So I was invited to take the test because I had already been entered by the company I worked for, Four Seasons Hotels, entered me into the competition for the best sommelier in the Northwest, which was in Seattle, and they had it at the hotel the week after I was hired. And they said, well, we've already enrolled you in this competition. I said, it's French wine. I know more about Italian and American wine, like California and Washington, than I know about French. I said, you want me to compete for the best sommelier in French wine in the Northwest? And they go, well, you're enrolled. You better not disgrace us. So I went home. I knew a little bit already, but I went home and I studied. I boned up, and I thought, okay, I have to know all these little areas. And so when the test came, I passed. So I go to the next one in New York. The first time I had kind of bronchitis, so I couldn't really smell or function that well. So I won. I didn't do that well. I came in fourth. So the next time I was entered again, and I thought, well, I won't have a cold. I won't walk through a blizzard without a coat like I did before this test. So, because there was a big snowstorm that came, and I had to walk to work across Aurora Bridge. If you know Seattle, it's a long bridge over over a canal that goes from Lake Union to the ocean and to Puget Sound. And by the time I got to work, I had icicles hanging off my ear, off my nose, off my eyebrows, off my clothes. So I came down with a cold, and then it became bronchitis. So the next time I made sure I didn't do anything that stupid, and I won. So I became the best sommelier in America in French wines. And then that meant 2 years later I had to go to Paris to compete for the international one. And I go like, okay, I want to do well. I'm studying everything about France now, and I passed. I thought I just didn't want to. I was competing against a lot of French people, but I thought, well, if I lose, it's okay. There are all these famous French sommeliers. Well, so what if I lose? It'll be great experience. I'll represent the United States in an international competition. And I just happened to be the winner. I was placed number one. I was the world's best sommelier in French wines in Paris. And I go, okay, that's great. It's going to be hard to go back and teach freshman English and German at the university again.
You know, it's kind of weird. If you weren't in the industry, like my brother's a level 2 sommelier. Shout out to Leroy if you're listening. But at the same time, like I feel like for those that were either casuals, you know, maybe those that didn't know the intricacies, there were movies like Sideways and Bottle Shop that kind of brought a little bit more knowledge to the history of the wine world. But also the show Somm that was on Netflix.
Yeah.
You mentioned, working out of the Pacific Northwest. And, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the nuances of American wines in a minute. But we had Brian McClintock, who was master. He joined us on the podcast when he was launching Birdcall Wine.
Oh, so that's a while ago, yeah.
And we were a member of his wine club until they recently closed it down this past year.
Oh, they did.
But, yes, sir. But we loved it, and he kind of brought me around to the natural side of, the fermentation process and, that style of wines, and it's been very eye-opening. But, I think those movies and that show also kind of shed a little light on the industry itself. And so I understand that, you kind of have a little bit of that lineage as well, but I wanted to talk about the adaptation of American wine from the European sector, because here in Colorado, we have grapes growing on the western slope, but it took us a little while. It was very jammy, off-fruit wines coming in its infancy ages, but we're starting to see more of these kind of like new age winemakers doing a little kind of wackier stuff, but we've learned what grapes play well at our high elevation.
Yeah.
When you were going away from working under, the big regime of the Four Seasons, or you were looking to start one of your, mini wine groups, or I guess you're Lengua Franca, what was the nuance, or what was the steps that you had to take? Was it like, okay, we know what the temperate plays with up here? Or were you like, I'm going to go grab some stuff from Romania that America has never seen and play with that because your Chardonnays are off the chart. How was it navigating and starting out, making your own and trying to put more of the Pacific Northwest region on the wine world's map?
Well, I grew up there. I grew up in Washington State, so I was familiar with Washington. I was already, I'm an older guy, so I already was, tasting wines from Oregon. I am. I'm pretty old. I won't shock you. I'm not going to say how old I am, but I'll just tell you. You can figure it out. In the 1970s, I was able to taste, early 70s, I was able to taste some of the new wines from Oregon, the Pinot Noirs, and I go, well, we can't grow Pinot Noir in Washington, but they grow it pretty well down in the Willamette Valley, and I was already, by 1980, I was working with André Telechev, 79 and 80, I worked with André Telechev at Chateau Ste. Michelle. André was considered the dean of California winemakers, and he also did after he retired from BV, a winery, Beaulieu Vineyards, he had a contract with Chateau Ste. Michelle to help them make Cabernet. So, I started early on because my background was chemistry. I was really interested in wine production, and because my family were farmers, we looked at farms all my childhood. We went to pick fruit. We picked cherries in Wenatchee. We picked apricots in Okanagan. We could have gotten apricots in Wenatchee, but we knew the apricots in Okanagan were better because the soil, the climate was just better there. So I grew up with the idea that things grow differently in different places. So I was always inoculated with that. And then when I started studying wine as a professional wine buyer, I looked at Europe, and I go, France has such amazing specific flavors coming from pieces of land within meters of each other, or even just centimeters of each other. And there's a big difference. And they say that's one vineyard, that's the other. That may be Geneviève, Merceau Geneviève, and that's going to be Merceau Charme, and they're different. And you go, why are they different? We make them the same way, but the flavor is different, and we keep them separate. And they have a different name on the label. And you go, wow, that's really fine-tuning terroir. You're looking for what the place gives you, what the soil, what the microclimate, what the water availability, what the exposure, the depth of the soil, what that all gives to that wine. And it's different even if it's right next to each other. So in America, we always blend it and stuff. I go, there's something wrong with that. It may work for some varieties like Cabernet, but it won't work for Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. And I was always enamored of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay because I love Burgundy, and everybody who gets into wine at one point, they think the Burgundy is the greatest thing. And I go, why is Burgundy the only place on earth? And I thought about it, and I thought, maybe in Oregon you could do something like that. So I was never really interested in going to the wild varietals. My mother's family grew Grassa, which is do you know what Grassa is?
I think I do.
Yeah, it made one of the most famous wines of the Renaissance called Côte-Nard. It looks like Côte-Nard if you look at it. It's pronounced Côte-Nard. And it can be in a late harvest wine. It's kind of almost like a Viognier in some ways. You can make it drier. You can make it a little richer, sweeter. And it's very flavorful, and you can make a botrytis wine from it. And I thought that's very interesting. And they also had a white grape called Fetiasca Alba. Those would be interesting in Oregon. But they're hard to get, and you have to wait. I don't even know if there's any. But to me, I knew I wanted to prove to people that Oregon could grow world-class Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in a way that they never dreamt of before. And I needed a team that knew terroir, understood the differences between that millimeter of soil and that millimeter of soil next to it. And for that, I needed someone from France, not because of how they make wine. No wine is made. That's a bad thing. You use the word wine is made. No, wine is not made. Wine is grown. It's a product of nature. You don't say to a farmer, what corn do you make? What kind of corn do you have? Do you make this sweet corn or that corn? You grow. What do you grow? Because people know a farmer doesn't make it, it's grown, and they harvest it. And it's the same with wine. Wine is grown in specific places if you understand and listen to the places and think and are sensitive to what nature is giving you, and you don't destroy nature. So it's important to farm organically with regenerative farming practices that are well thought through, sometimes inspired by biodynamic farming. But I don't follow biodynamic because there's a lot of hocus pocus with it. But it's fun to put cow horns in the corners of your vineyard, but it doesn't really affect much, really. But farming with low impact, no till, conserving water. So I dry farm. I keep a cover crop intact as much as we can. Sometimes we have to renew a part of the vineyard. So we have mountain lions. We have elk and deer. So they eat each other. One gets eaten by the other. There's no problem. We have quail. We have rabbits. The foxes eat the rabbits. The hawks eat the quail. Sometimes the foxes get the quail too. So we don't kill anything. We just let all the predators there. I'm not worried about mountain lions. Any of you guys out there who've ever encountered a mountain lion? Well, the problem is if you're afraid of a mountain lion, you run. If you run, they're going to try to get you. You have to yell at them, and you have to stand up to them and just take a stick. And there was a 72-year-old lady when I lived in San Francisco and I had Rubicon Restaurant. It was famous on Crystal. It was Crystal Springs, which is the water for the peninsula south of San Francisco. Her husband, they were walking at dusk, and this mountain lion was stalking them as juvenile. They're the ones like teenagers. They'll do anything that push the boundaries. They saw this old couple, and it's, oh, that'll be nice. That's a nice little prey. I'll try humans for a change. So it grabbed the husband, and the 72-year-old lady took a stick and beat the mountain lion over the head, and the mountain lion took off. Her husband needed some skin grafts on his scalp, but he survived. Yeah, she was unhurt. She just beat the mountain lion, and the mountain lion left.
That's wild. So you brought in some folks from out of the country that knew what you were looking for and how you wanted to grow the grain.
How we wanted to grow. Not how do you want to make, but how you want to grow. And then they were also sensitive. They were like nature whisperers like me. What will work here, When I planted the vineyard, I did a lot of things that I did on intuition, but it had a scientific basis, and it worked. And the guys who worked with me, Thomas Sav, the guy we call winemaker because English is an impoverished language. I like to call him vigneron, or the head of wine production. He's the head of wine production. He also is the head viticulturalist in a way. He's above all the team that produces wine in the vineyard or in the cellar. And he was trained at Domaine de la Romanée-Conti. He was trained at Domaine du Jacques. He was a brilliant young man when we hired him, 28 years old, but I could see this guy knows what he's doing. And he came, I had Dominique Lafon as a partner. He wanted to come with Dominique from Evening Land, which I also had begun. That was another company I began. And he came over. I didn't recruit him. I got to say, Rajat Par is a dear friend and my protege. Shout out to Raj. And I asked him, may I hire him? He wants to come over, and he said he's going to leave you anyway if I don't hire him. But he's done. He wants to go somewhere else. So he said, yeah, you take him. You can. I understand. You can have him. We want to do our own thing, and he wants to be with Dominique, so it's fine. So I took him too, and we started this company, and Dominique and he are like father and son. And Dominique taught us so much about white wine, because the places I mentioned that Thomas Savre had worked before in France were red wine producers mainly, and they did a lot of whole cluster, and that's why I wanted him. So I thought, this is great, because Dominique hates whole cluster. He's a de-stemmer. He's a disciple of Henri Jaye. So we have tension in the company over whole cluster versus not, but ultimately we all love each other. We had some fights, but ultimately we all came to the understanding. Yeah.
And you want to have those combative conversations. Like if you have a bunch of yes men, then you're going to end up being like, you know what, I'm glad we got to butt heads.
Yeah.
Because that's sometimes where the best ideas and products come out of.
Exactly. Without the headbutting, we would have been stagnant. And with the headbutting, everybody was experimenting a little and listening to the other people respectfully. We don't fight too much anymore, but at first we had some it was over, especially Calariclone. I planted a lot of Calariclone, and they hated it. But now they've grown to like it now that it's established. They say, oh, yeah, it's actually not so bad.
Well, I mean, that is, it's a little bit of a, and it's similar to those movies I referenced earlier, which I understand you probably know some of those cats that, won those awards or helped change the perception of American wine. But you've done that on a worldwide scale, and, now you are doing something, you're blazing trails for those that are coming up behind you. You mentioned Raj and other folks out of the Northwest. Let's talk a little bit about what you've got on the shelves these days, what Lengua Franca is about and what it's up to, and what you're most proud of. So a lot of our listeners are probably going to be like, man, this guy knows his shit. Where can I try his wines that, he's obviously been working his whole life on? Let's talk a little bit about the products that y'all are, pushing these days, but how we got to the level of award-winning Chardonnay, the Noirs of the, I know that Oregonian Noirs have kind of taken that, that title of being, upper echelon, and you have a lot to do with that. Your brands, those that have worked underneath you, I guess, it's like a coaching tree.
Yeah.
Almost.
Well,
How did you begin
I don't know. I wish I were just partying, but I love people, so I love talking about the wine. But there's a little bit of work involved. I can't tell my workers I'm just having a party, but I enjoy myself.
What are we so proud of? What are we out there telling the world about these days as we're kind of working our way around the globe?
Well, what I'm most proud of is not actually what I did with my own company that awakened. I kind of made it to fruition with my company, but at Evening Land, Dominique, when he came, and I worked on him with a friend of mine, Daniel Jonas, to recruit him to come to Oregon. And he loved Oregon because I knew it, because he always was really a very good friend of Veronique Drouin, who was there since the mid '80s. And he had a vineyard. We had a vineyard that was Seven Springs, and it had 4 acres of Chardonnay. And he said, "What do we do with this? I don't want to make Chardonnay. I have Montrachet, I have Meursault, Charme, and Perrier, and Geneviève. I make white wine, but I'm known for white wine. I want to make red wine here in Oregon. I want to make Pinot Noir." And I go, "Well, look, there's 4 acres. It's too late to tear it out. You make 1 year of it, and we can tear it out after the season, and then you can replant it with Pinot." And he goes, "Well, you'll be able to sell it?" And I said, "Believe me, if you make it, we can sell it as the only vintage that Dominique Lafon makes a Chardonnay in the New World." And so after the harvest and after the wine was fermented and he tasted the wines, he said, "Larry," he called me, he said, "Larry, we have to plant more Chardonnay." He said, "It's even better than the Pinot," because the company we were working for, they dictated when the Pinot could be picked, because he was coming from France and he didn't know Oregon. And he said, "You should pick the Pinot now, it's ready." And the people there said, "No, we have to wait for more ripeness." And he said, "If you pick for more ripeness, you're going to have to acidify. And the grapes are ready. You can see they're ripe." And so they fought, and they said, "You can pick the Chardonnay when you want, but leave the Pinot to us and we'll pick it later." So he picked the Chardonnay. He made a couple of cuvées of Chardonnay, and it got on the front page of the Wine Spectator from the first vintage. And he said, and he was right. Well, I still couldn't plant more Chardonnay in that vineyard when I was running that, because the market hadn't caught up. By the time I started mine 7.5 years later, people were still ridiculing him. Francis Ford Coppola liked to say the thing that you're most ridiculed and your biggest failures early in your career tend to be your biggest successes later on. So for 8 years, he was ridiculed, and I was ridiculed for the first 2 vintages when we started Lengua Franca. And then finally people said, "Okay, how do you guys make that? How do you?" They're saying, "What do you do?" Like, I go, when the grapes are right, the grapes tell you, listen to your vineyard. When the pH starts to rise, that's when you pick. There's a sign that the vine has a hormonal signature, and it says when we're ripe, we just start pumping potassium into the fruit. And that's when you pick, because then your pH goes up, and you're going to have too low an acid. You're going to have to acidify. Our wines are naked. We don't add anything. It's wild yeast from the grape skins. It's a spontaneous malolactic. It's no added acid, no nothing. We don't have to add water. The alcohol is only 12.5 to 13.5%, depending on how hot the vintage is, because it's heat that accumulates sugar. And the acid is really based, the phenolics, when the vines say they're ripe, is based on sunlight. We have more sunlight than California. We're farther north, and we have no fog to worry about, whereas people in California put their Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in fog zones, so it takes them even longer to ripen. So that's why I say this is the greatest place on earth to grow Pinot and Chardonnay. And the Chardonnay was the revelation. That's what I'm most proud of. And now people, when they taste it around the world, they go, "Wow, how do you grow that?" Or they say make, because they don't understand it's really grown. I say it's the place. The place gives the flavor. All our wines are made equally, and we have 3 different Chardonnays on the table, and each one is made the same way. It's production, how the process it goes through, that are dictated by the winemaking team headed by Thomas Savre. Thomas says, "Look, this vintage, okay, the fruit's a little tougher. We have to handle it a little more gently, or it's delicate. We can handle it a little more aggressively, so it's not gonna be ruined. But we have to look at each vintage, and we have to do what's proper for that vintage. And if it's very tannic for a red, you can't do a lot of pump overs and punch downs because they'll get too tannic. And if it's a white, if it's a thick-skinned, we may not do any hard pressing. We may be a little more gentle. We may do a little bit of different press programs to bring out the best and not make it overly tannic. So it's really product you have to watch. It's like making anything. It's like making anything that is grown and by nature. So you have to respect the product and respect what you're given. And really, it's grown, and you have to respect where it's grown and to bring out the best flavor of the place.
I was reading that, like, in-depth kind of description, but it also kind of surprises a lot of folks, especially when you think of Oregon in the Northwest. You often think of that inclement weather juxtaposed to sunny, but y'all are obviously more tucked into the stateside than the coastal side. Is that correct?
No, we're coastal, but we have rain 9 months out of the year, 8 to 9 months out of the year, but it stops sometime in June, and it begins again either late September or early October. So that's our season. And the problem we have is it's still raining when it's flowering in the spring. We can have rains all the way through that. And so that reduces sometimes the set. So when the pollination happens, if it's raining or it's windy, and it's always windy and it's almost always raining, it lowers your pollination rate so that you have less fruit. We have frost, we have hail, we have all these things from the weather. But the nice thing, the blessing, is that between June and September, probably no rain, maybe in September a little rain, but not too bad. It probably freshens the vines up and knocks the dust off. And today, almost every vintage we've had, whether it's a little bit colder or a little bit warmer, has been really much better than the past. We've had more consistency. So we went from too cold to, like, with the climate change, we're now like in the perfect zone. Burgundy went from in the perfect zone to a little bit too warm. And I knew before I planted that the meteorological forecast would be the same amount of rain. Temperatures would rise maybe 1 to 1.5 degrees, but we have the same amount of rainfall. And since we dry farm, that's all we needed.
So as we sit here, what we're sipping on right now, and let's talk a little bit about the things that maybe are promoting on this tour, and where folks may be able to get these products, whether around Colorado and Northwest. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, this vintage or what we're sipping on right now.
You're speaking on the 2022 OVNI, so it's the vintage I was talking about, and it's a Chardonnay from that vintage. And we actually made more than we thought we would because we were compensating for everybody, all the people. This is made up from our neighbors, not just our fruit. This is mainly our neighbors' fruit because OVNI is our Willamette Valley blend, but we get from the best vineyards that are similar to ours on volcanic soils and organically farmed and have good practices with their employees. So we looked at all the practices that have to deal with equality, equity, and inclusion. And we include everybody when we taste wine, everybody in our team, from the tractor driver and the pruner to the winemaking team, gets to taste. So this wine is available. It's the one we make. That's why we buy fruit, to make it a big enough volume. But we have great vineyards, so you can taste. It's mineral. It has floral notes. It has stony finish, like a rock, like chalky note in the finish, and wet stone. And it has nice lemony fruit. And that comes mainly from one part of this, about 30, 40, 35%, let's say, come from marine sediments on the other side of our hill. We only really prefer volcanic. But to make it fruitier, a little fruitier and more lemony, it comes from those marine sediments. So it's, again, the place where it's grown. Even though it's just on the other side of the hill from us, it has a totally different flavor, so it makes it a little more lemony and citrusy. The next wine is our Lengua Franca estate, which I planted. And it has shallow soils, and those shallow soils, it's all volcanic, and it's all from our place. And you see an uptick in minerality and less of that citrusy quality, and you're getting now kind of ethereal white peach and hawthorn blossom and a little lemon zest, and you get white smoke. As it ages, it'll develop like a white truffle note, and it gets really more interesting. It's more complex and more ethereal and longer. The finish will be a lot longer.
All right, so I've tried the first one. I'm down to the second one. I know that most folks in your field will either spirit or do things like that. I'm not in that field. I'm not very much of a get high on that supply type situation. So I want to know, do you have a favorite? Was there a year that you still think, oh my God, if I still have, a case of that 96 or something of that nature, which one takes you back?
16 whites, not for reds, but 16 whites were so killer. But I had a 16 red the other night, and I go, oh, my God, this is great, too. So my problem is they're all pretty good. But my favorite was 16 Bunker Hill, and 16 Bunker Hill probably was my favorite. Sisters is always my favorite in a way. That's named after my mother and her sister. But this is the best you can do on this we're going to run out of time to do sisters, but we can taste it afterwards. But it's named after my mother and her sister who survived the war, and they never talked about their family ever, about what it was like to grow up in Romania, because it was so traumatic, the loss of their family during the Second World War and the loss of lives that they experienced and what they went through. And so, but they always loved their childhood, and they loved their parents, and they talked about their parents and how they were nurtured, and they still spoke Esperanto, and they were polyglots. So even as farm girls, so they stuck together all 90 years of their lives. The younger sister was about a year younger, and when my mother died, she survived another 4 or 5 months before she passed away. My aunt, her sister, died, so they were together their whole lives. And when it came time to name our finest cuvée, it's those people, my mother, who taught me about food and wine and taste and chemistry of food and how to put a sauce together. And my dad taught me about food product and about farming and all this. So, I owe them a lot. And my mother and her sister always loved white wine because I said her father grew, Grassa, and Grassa's white grape. So I said they always loved white.
Okay, so your family seems to be obviously heavily entrenched in the wine scene for years, on centuries, on decades, on generations, on everything. Our podcast, we do a little bit about a lot more so than a lot about anything. We're pretty much fucking idiots. But I just wanted to ask you to take off your word back for a couple minutes, and I'm going to ask you some stupid questions.
All right.
The first question is going to be, if you could have any superpower, what superpower would you want to have and why?
To make world peace, to make people respect one another and love one another as brothers. That would be my superpower I'd want.
You should have just said, I wish I could teleport. That seems like there's a higher likelihood of that actually coming.
You're right. Unfortunately.
Okay, that's a great answer. Let's see if you can do it back to back. If you were a dinosaur, or if a dinosaur was best reflecting your personality, what kind of dinosaur would you be?
An Arcturix. An Arcturix.
What the hell's an Arcturix? I consider myself a Jurassic Park fan. I don't remember this one. Please elaborate.
They didn't have it because no one knows what it is, I guess. But if you're into outdoor, because there's a company named Arcturix, and it's named after. It's named after the dinosaur that evolved to have feathers. So it's the first precursor to birds, because birds are reptiles. Dinosaurs are the precursors of modern reptiles, and it's the first the first dinosaur to evolve into a bird. So it had feathers, and they discovered it in China in the late 90s. So I don't know, or mid 90s. So it wouldn't have been in Jurassic. Yeah, no. So it's also very scarce, whereas there are tons of Tyrannosaurus rexes and velociraptors and all that all over the world. But this is very special. It's a beautiful idea that you evolve. The idea of evolving. You have to always think ahead and evolve and be aware of what's going around you and be alert to great new things that are out there that you didn't know before or didn't exist before.
Yeah, you've been heavily entrenched in this industry for 40-ish years. Again, I'm not going to date you here, so I'll leave it at that. But at the same time, that's exactly it. Like, you can either be stuck in the mud and just in your ways be entrenched and you'll eventually go extinct, or you can kind of see how the market, and like you mentioned earlier with climate change and how right now we're in that butter zone. It could be a little precarious, 10 years down the road if Taylor Swift keeps flying across the street. Realistically, you have to evolve. Otherwise, you will be left behind. So I genuinely appreciate that answer. Okay, you're almost out of the woods. Again, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Here's a question you'll probably hate. Our listeners are probably like, hey, is there a $20 bottle of wine that you don't hate? Is there something under $20 or a mass-produced wine that you're not mad at? You're like, yeah, that's serviceable for maybe, the paycheck-to-paycheckers that, just want to have a nice patio sesh in the springtime or take with them to the park. Is there something that's in, the super cheap, approachable that you're like, I don't hate that? Because when I asked McClintock this, he said Jack fucking Daniels. He was like, if I have a long day, I just want a whiskey. He's like, I don't care if it's cheap or expensive. I'll take a Jack Daniels.
But that's more than $20. Well, it is. A shot may not be, but, so you buy the bottle. But
what would be your cheap buzz if you could name one? It doesn't have to be wine. You could say Taco vodka if that's your cup of tea. Drops, blackberry, cannabis, drops. I can go to sleep. It relaxes me. I'm all wound up. My wife wanted me to make wine to get me out of the house because I'm so high energy. And she says,
she's a laid back, calm person. I'm this like firecracker, and I always have to do something. And so she said, so to me, drops are the way to go because when I'm home, I can relax, I can go to sleep. I get tense muscles, and because I'm working with my arms and swinging a pickaxe or digging ditches or planting trees. And so when at night, I may have a shot of something, but it won't be cheap. Because I don't drink that much. So I've been nursing a bottle of Hibiki 21 for about 15 years. I just have a drop because I don't need much. It's but I love the flavor, and I'll have one of these. I'll have a slice of the blackberry drop. It's drop brand blackberry flavor. It's so calming. It relaxes my muscles, and I can sleep a whole night, and I'm just fantastic the next day.
Well, that's the greatest answer I've heard all day. We have so much more common. You're like a savant and a genius, and I'm like mentally slow and have to wear a helmet when I walk. But we both love the same things, and that's awesome. This will be the last question, and I swear to God, I'll let y'all go back to enjoying y'all's day. It's called The Last Somm, and I wasn't going to ask this question, but I feel like with your intimate knowledge of the industry and the world, and someone that's lived a very full life and seen a lot of it, The Last Supper is you get 3 people who are dead or alive, but they cannot be friends or family. Who would you like to join you on your Last Supper, and what would we eat or drink, or what food and beverage would be on the table for your Last Supper?
I didn't expect that question. People I would love to have dinner with us who are gone, including Gandhi would be an interesting one. I don't know. Probably, I don't know. I can't. It's hard to answer because I can think of so many people. My Last Supper would be a group of about 50 people. It would be an interesting conversation like Benjamin Franklin, or it would be the person. It would be John Brown, who was an abolitionist, or it would be there'd be an interesting conversation because there was so much slavery in the colonies, and there was a guy who said no. That would be a great conversation. It'd be nice to meet some of the people that helped to promote world peace, like Romain Rolland, who wrote a lot of books on pacifism. He wrote a bio of a lot of people like Gandhi, even, and Albert Schweitzer. Albert Schweitzer would be another one. So I'd have to think. Okay. So we don't have to go through the whole list, but you get the idea. I want people who cared about people. And fortunately, many people that I would want on the last dinner are still alive, like Quincy Jones. I've eaten dinner with him at his house, and he allowed me to buy wine for him. And he's one of the most amazing human beings on earth, not just because of his music, but of his personal relationships with all the women who have loved him and all the wives he's had. They all live together. They each have their own place, and their daughters have their own place in a compound. Yeah, they have their own place in his compound. He built a home for them in Beverly Hills and Bel Air. Each one has their own place, and they all connect. And then he can be with them. And his brother died young. His brother's widow, Gloria, cooks for him and takes care of him. And she cooked dinner for us. It was fantastic. He's a great human being. There are so many. Maybe I'd like to see Jimi Hendrix again. He went to my high school, and he did a school, assembly. We used to call them assemblies for the whole high school. And he came. He didn't leave on good terms. He didn't graduate, but he came back to inspire our fellow students to do better in their lives, because it was mainly an African American, and we call them a black school, about 80%, Garfield High School in Seattle. And we had a lot of great. Ernestine Anderson went there, as well as Jimi Hendrix and Quincy Jones. And there was also the woman who became the wife of Bruce Lee went to that high school, and Bruce Lee had a dojo in the area. And 2 of my locker mates were disciples of Bruce Lee from Hong Kong who pretended to be high school students. They were twins, but they're really in their late 20s, but they wanted to study with him. And it was amazing. It was an amazing school. When you have cultural diversity and you have all this input of different cultures and peoples, it's so fascinating. It was a wonderful place to grow up.
I mean, that sounds wonderful. I'm from Mississippi, just an idiot from the South. But I was like, do we have 25 famous people? Because that'd be cool.
Mark Twain would be another one I'd want to have. That guy, I idolized him in my youth. I read every essay he wrote and every book he wrote.
That's a great call as well.
Yeah.
Hear enough of the Mark Twains for the Last Supper.
Yeah.
Larry, I can't thank you enough. Before we go, are we able to buy these in restaurants and liquor stores across Colorado? A lot of our listenership is here, but for those that may be across, those that are in Chicago, Chicago. We have a large base in New York
Yeah.
and New Orleans
Ah.
as well. Where can we find these products? Should we just go to the Larry Stern website and sign up for the wine club? What's the best way to procure some of these samples that we enjoyed today?
Okay, some of these samples are you can get really basically from our website. It's linguafranca.wine, so LinguaFranca, linguafranca.wine, not .com. Don't put .com. It's .wine. Who cares about com? It's about wine. That's a good way to look up our whole portfolio. But in stores here, and I can only name. I'm at a disadvantage. We're at Proof. We're at Mr. B's. Okay, and we've got a number of stores that have handled us over the years. But we also focus a lot on fine restaurants because we provide the ovnis that you tasted. They're affordable for restaurants, and they can sell them. It'll be a bottle well under $100 usually, and it'll be maybe in the 60s, or and then you can buy them retail for probably about 40. But we like restaurants. So Frasca, Velvet Cellar, which just opened recently. Hop Alley, maybe. I don't know if they bought it. I think they did. They got it already, Hop Alley. No, they got it. Rhodey got it. He liked the wines. They were thrilled with them. Yeah. So we've been a lot of places, unfortunately, since my last visit because I didn't get to Denver since COVID. This is like I've been to the mountains. I go to the mountain. I ski, so I confess. So I go to the mountains more frequently. But here, this is probably the first big visit I made since 2020, because I was here early in 20 before COVID. So that's the last time I was here. So it's been about 4 years. And I'm really glad to be back. I'm sad that some of these streets that were so vibrant now have empty storefronts, and a lot of people didn't make it. So I hope people come back and support the local businesses because we were in a lot of restaurants. We were also in a lot of stores, and some of these guys are gone, and I really feel sorry for them. Mateo, I'll give a shout-out to Mateo yeah. But Mateo had Mateo's restaurant in Boulder. This is... Yeah, it is. That's the way it's spelled. It's Mateo. He had a restaurant in Boulder on Pearl. It was there a long time, and he had a great wine list, and it was a mainly Italian menu. And he was there. He had been in his youth. He was the second in the state in high school in moguls, and he could ski. I skied with him. He was a killer, and he worked for me. He's black. And he came to me in a short haircut when he went to work for me at Rubicon Restaurant. He came in a short haircut and a blue blazer and an Oxford school tie. And I said, "Yeah, this is San Francisco. We don't dress like that. You can be a little more casual." And he goes, "Well, I heard you're a master, and I was told that this is the way you should dress for the masters." And I go like, "No, he was Matthew. Then he didn't become Mateo until he came back." And I go, "No, it's relaxed, just." And have some fun. And so he had dreadlocks. At his own restaurant, he had dreadlocks. He was really relaxed. He had so much fun. Yeah. And I didn't see it. Maybe I missed the corner. So, Mateo, if you're out there, you have my number. Call me because I really miss seeing your restaurant. So I hope it's you relocated or I just made a mistake on the corner it was at.
Well, Larry, I can't tell you enough how much we appreciate you taking the time to chat with us, not only about the lineage of Lengua Franca, but also your story from becoming just a kid learning how to nose wine in the kitchen with mom to becoming one of the greatest master sommeliers this country and this world has ever seen. I feel honored to be able to sit here and drink juice with you that I know your hands have worked tirelessly on. Again, thank you to Spencer for setting up this conversation and to our sponsors over at Seed Money Consulting. Tax season may be over, but you need to be planning for your future, whether you need a 529 for your kid or you may need someone to take care of your books. Year in and year out, our friends at Seed Money are here for you. Until next week, I'm going to say, don't forget, stay high, stay hungry. Cheers. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.